All right, welcome to today's episode. Your brain is not trying to ruin your life, it's trying to repeat what feels safe. So, welcome back to Raw and Reconnected, the podcast where we talk about sex, relationships, nervous systems, healing, desire, emotional patterns, and how to stop accidentally recreating the same life experiences on repeat. My name is Lewis-Lambert, and today we are diving deep into the neuroscience of why people self-sabotage, stay stuck, repeat unhealthy patterns, and then struggle to create the life that they actually want. But we're doing it without sounding like a dusty old textbook written by a man named Richard in 1987, and nothing against any of the Richards out there. We're keeping this simple, real, straightforward, and slightly feral. Because once people understand how the brain actually works, they stop making their struggles mean that, oh no, there's something wrong with me. And they actually start realizing, oh, my nervous system is just running on old programming. And that changes everything. So the thing about your brain is that it loves familiarity. Okay, your brain's main job is not happiness. It's prediction and survival. Your brain's main job is to keep you alive. Your brain is constantly asking, what's familiar? What's predictable? What keeps us alive? And here's the important part. The brain often chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar happiness. Okay, so listen to that one more time. The brain often chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar happiness. And that explains half of human behavior. Why does it do that? It does it because familiar experiences require less energy and they feel safer neurologically. So your brain builds pathways based on repetition. Think of it like hiking trails in a forest. The more you walk a path, the clearer and easier it becomes. Neural pathways work the same way. So if someone repeatedly experiences rejection, criticism, chaos, abandonment, stress, emotional inconsistency, shame is a big one, then the brain creates these strong pathways around those experiences. Over time, the nervous system starts expecting them, not consciously, just automatically, all within that unconscious brain. That's why people can say they want healthy love while subconsciously feeling very uncomfortable when they actually receive it, because healthy feels unfamiliar. So unfamiliar can feel unsafe to the nervous system. The thing is that the brain is a prediction machine. So your brain is constantly predicting what's going to happen next based on past experiences. This is called predictive processing. So basically, your brain is using the old information to guess what the current situation means. So an example of this would be something like if someone grew up with unpredictable caregivers, their nervous system became hyper alert to emotional changes. So later in life, for instance, these are this might be a child who grows up in a family where 1 minute mom or dad is like fantastic and super loving. And then 2 seconds later, they just are losing their shit for no reason. That child begins to learn that it has to really watch mom and dad and how they react so that they know when to remove themselves from danger, right? So later in life, things like a delayed text, a shift in the tone of the conversation, or the fact that someone's showing them less affection, or someone actually needing space can trigger emotional reactions that are absolutely massive within these people. Not because the situation is objectively dangerous, but because the brain predicts that this feels similar to past abandonment, and the body reacts before the logic even catches up or even enters the room. So that's why people sometimes know they're overreacting, but they still feel completely overwhelmed and can't seem to stop themselves. The emotional brain activates way faster than the rational brain, which brings us to the next part. So your amygdala, it's in there. It's in the brain. It's basically an overcaffeinated security guard. So let's talk about the amygdala a little bit. The amygdala is part of the brain that's responsible for detecting threats. So think of it as your nervous system's alarm system. Its job is to constantly scan for danger. Now, here's the problem. The amygdala does not distinguish very well between physical danger and emotional danger. So rejection, criticism, shame, conflict, or emotional withdrawal can actually activate the same stress responses as physical threat. That's why heartbreak literally hurts physically. Your brain and body interprets social pain as survival relevance. So any type of pain can possibly, even social pain, mean that it's a threat to your survival. So when someone has unresolved emotional wounds, their amygdala becomes extra sensitive. All right. Which means their nervous system reacts quickly and intensely. So it can look like anxiety, panic attacks, overthinking, shutdowns, people pleasing, emotional reactivity, avoidance and defensiveness, or hypervigilance. And the nervous system then believes that I'm protecting us. It thinks it's doing good, but it doesn't actually think I'm ruining our life, which in some cases, it could be really damaging your life. And that distinction really matters. So a lot of people do keep repeating the same patterns. So this is called repetition compulsion, which sounds really fancy, but it's actually very simple. The brain likes completing unresolved patterns. So meaning people unconsciously recreate emotional dynamics that feel familiar in hopes of finally getting a different outcome, right? Weird, I know, but this is why someone might chase emotionally unavailable partners, stay in toxic dynamics thinking it's going to get better, fear healthy intimacy, sabotage success, settle for less, overwork constantly, or tolerate poor treatment. Like they will tolerate being treated like shit. The nervous system is often trying to solve old emotional experiences. So here's an example of this. If someone never felt chosen emotionally growing up, they may become obsessed with finally getting unavailable people to choose them. Not because they're stupid, but because the nervous system is chasing emotional resolution. Here's the problem. The brain cannot heal through reenactment alone. Awareness is required. Otherwise, people stay trapped repeating the same emotional loops while calling it bad luck. Okay. Now, we've heard this before. Dopamine is not happiness. And now I'm actually going to delve into it a bit because I realize I didn't tell you exactly what that meant. So this part is important. People misunderstand dopamine constantly. Dopamine is not pleasure. It's anticipation and motivation. It's the maybe this time chemical, which explains so much about emotionally addictive relationships. Unpredictability creates strong dopamine responses. So that's why inconsistent texting, mixed signals, hot and cold behavior, emotional unpredictability, it can feel addictive. It can feel like you're going crazy and you start to hyper focus on it because intermittent rewards keep the brain hyper focused. It's literally the same neurological mechanism involved in a gambling addiction. We've spoke about this before. Your brain becomes obsessed with chasing that reward. And that's why toxic relationships can feel so intoxicating, not because they're deeply healthy soul connections, but because your reward system is activated. Meanwhile, that stable, healthy love feels less exciting because the nervous system isn't constantly spiking stress and dopamine together. That doesn't mean that healthy love is boring. It means that your nervous system is not in survival chemistry. There's a huge difference. Stress does destroy libido. So let's connect it all back together, okay? So let's connect this back to sex and desire because it does matter. When the nervous system is chronically stressed, the body prioritizes survival over reproduction and pleasure. So meaning high cortisol and chronic stress directly affects libido. It impacts your arousal, lubrication, testosterone, emotional openness, sensitivity, your orgasms, your desire. And yet people blame themselves constantly. But the nervous system is really quite simple. If we don't feel safe, we don't fully open. That's biology. This is why emotional safety does matter so much in intimacy. This is why a lot of people drink before they have intercourse because they want to let loose and they feel that they can make the connections open easier. It doesn't technically, it does help with inhibition, but it's not something that is sustainable. When you can learn and you can rewire for emotional safety, that openness, you can actually be present, you can actually enjoy, you can maybe even remember what happens. And it's a whole different dynamic when you are present and embodied in that moment during intimacy and sex. Just saying. Because the body cannot consistently and constantly be scanning for danger around us or trying to actually like pay attention and feel that pleasure, because it will sit there and it will scan everything, whether the danger is like, what do they think of what I look like? Are they looking at my roles? Whether the danger is somebody's going to come to the door. So we need to be able to shut that down, and emotional danger counts. So this is why things like resentment and shame and anxiety and emotional disconnection, burnout, the chronic stress. Chronic stress is a really big one. They all impact libido massively. People think they need to fix desire because their desire is broken. Meanwhile, their nervous system just needs safety. So the wonderful thing about neuroplasticity is that it's absolutely beautiful, and it does provide some hope. Your brain is adaptable. This is what neuroplasticity is. So your neural pathways can change through the repeated new experiences. We've talked about this before. We can rewire our brains. You are not permanently wired this way. But here's where people get really, really frustrated. First off, it takes time. Second off, it takes repetition. It doesn't take an epiphany. One motivational quote will not override years of survival wiring. I am sorry. I wish it did, but it does not. It would obviously save a lot of people a lot of money and time and effort on things like therapy. But real rewiring requires awareness, repetition, emotional regulation, consistency, being embodied in the experience of safety. The brain learns through experience, not just information. I could sit here and tell you all day, but if you don't implement any of it, you're going to get nowhere. That's just how it is. That's why healing isn't just think positive. That's why healing's not just that toxic positivity. You have to repeatedly teach the nervous system, we are safe now. We can respond differently. We don't have to react automatically anymore. And eventually new pathways strengthen. It's just like building a new trail in the forest. At first it feels awkward. It's unnatural. It's slow. But with repetition, it does become easier. That is neuroscience. Neuroscience is a beautiful thing because your identity is actually a practiced state. This blows people's minds. A lot of your identity is actually repetition, which means that who you think you are is often based on the patterns you've practiced most. Think about the times you're trying to fit in with people. You practice certain patterns to fit in with those people. And then maybe a little while later, you realize you don't particularly like those people, but you've already practiced those patterns. So it's easy to stay friends with them instead of finding new ones. So when people say things like, I'm just anxious, I'm just insecure, I'm just bad at relationships, I'm just emotionally reactive, I was born this way, what they often mean is my nervous system has practiced these responses repeatedly, but they don't understand that that's what's actually happening. They really do believe that they're just born that way. But practice patterns can change. And that's empowering because it means healing is not becoming a different human. It's just teaching your brain and your body new ways of experiencing life. So if today's episode made your brain short circuit a little, I'm sorry, but good. Because understanding neuroscience removes so much shame. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start understanding that my nervous system has adapted to survive. But survival mode is not where life truly feels alive. Healing is teaching the brain safety, connection, regulation, self-trust, authenticity, and emotional resilience. It's one repeated experience at a time. So thank you for hanging out with me for another episode of Raw and Reconnected. If this episode helped you understand yourself differently, share it with someone whose nervous system desperately needs compassion instead of criticism. Our next episode, well, we're actually going to dive into something pretty cool. We're diving into your brain is your biggest sex organ, the neuroscience of female desire, pleasure, and connection. And trust me, that episode is going to expose some nerves. And this is Raw and Reconnected. No shame, no bullshit. Just truth, transformation, and the messy magic of being human.